Warning: some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Redditors who spend time in seclusion, camping, hiking, etc. What is the creepiest/scary/suspicious thing you have witnessed? I had my back up against a ponderosa, chilling there on the trail. I think I had a notebook for merit badges or for drawing. I don't recall. So this red squirrel comes out and grabs this nice fat green pine cone and starts to give it a good come to papa. Looking over. Right then, he perks up, looks down the path, grabs the cone and scrambles up the tree and out on the limb about 30 feet over the path holding that fat, pitchy green pine cone. So I see what spooked him. Up the trail comes this big, fat bastard eastern gray squirrel. An invasive pest species, essentially a big fluffy evil tree rat that preys on birds, mice, chipmunks, etc. The gray starts sniffing around where the pine cone had been, giving the ground a scratch. Red, 30 feet up, flings the hard, green pine cone down from the limb above, right onto Gray's head. Gray gets knocked for a loop. Just as he's recovering, 1 second later, Red jumps and performs a piledriver right on his face from 30 feet up, knocking his ass senseless. Red doesn't miss a beat but hightails it down the path with a good 50-yard lead. Gray gets up and tears after Red, hell-bent for leather, but Red was already rounding the bend out of sight. Then, later that afternoon, I caught our scoutmaster taking pictures of boys pooping in the latrines. Camp Baldwin, Oregon, 1988. I used to work as a lifeguard for a scouting camp situated on a huge lake, deeper in a pine forest. The kiddos would spend a week earning merit badges and swimming in the lake and getting splinters, then head home, only for the next batch to come out and do the same thing. This meant staff, like me, would spend a month or two living at the camp in tents. The staff campgrounds was a solid 10-minute walk from the showers, so if you wanted to be clean you had to walk the whole way down and back along this gravel road. Usually we went in groups, but occasionally we'd go alone. I'm walking down one night with my towel and sundries and I look up through the pine trees to see a bright light. Cool, I thought. That must be Venus or Jupiter or something. I reach the showers, basically wooden stalls hooked up to the water line, and as I'm showering I look up at this light. As I study it I realize it's way too bright to be a star or a planet. It's almost like a helicopter with a floodlight about 5 miles away, around 30 degrees off from being directly overhead. Thing is, there was no noise and the light wasn't moving. It's just there. I stare at it for a good 5 minutes, trying to figure out what the heck it is when it suddenly turns to the side and zips off. From the distance it was at, there was no way a helicopter could move that quickly. Not overly bizarre, I guess, but still weirded me out. I used to work for various state parks/national forests in the South, a lot of the times in mountainous environments. Well, one day my task was to get rid of any illegal fire pits/circles/whatever that I see on or off the beaten path. So I'm hiking and looking around and I see something smoking in the woods in what looks like a clearing past a small thicket of trees. I head towards it to do my job. Is it an illegal campfire? No, it's a burn-up KKK cross that is still smoking. I noped right out of there. I wasn't camping or hiking, but one night me and some friends were hanging out and someone pointed out that it was an incredibly starry night, so we went for a walk to a point where there's a great view of the whole sky. After a while, 2 bright lights appeared in the sky. Definitely not a helicopter as they were too far apart, but not a plane either as it was moving from side to side in a way that a plane couldn't. I tried to take a photo and my phone flash went off. Instantly, a spotlight pointed at us, before whatever it was turned around and disappeared in an instant, with red lights on the back of it. One girl we were with is convinced it was aliens, but the rest of us reckon it was some military drone or something. The creepiest bit was that, despite it being close to us, there was no sound whatsoever. A thread came up a few days ago about unsolved mysteries, so I thought I'd share a creepy story that happened to my dad and his cousin when they were young. Now this was about 20 years ago and wasn't really in seclusion, but nonetheless it is pretty disturbing. When my dad was young he would sleep over at his cousin's house during the weekends. The house was all one floor consisting of the front door entrance attached to the living room and kitchen. The living room had a long hallway for the bathroom, his aunt and uncle's room, then the bedroom where him and his cousin would sleep. His cousin's room was pretty small with only a bed, dresser and closet. The bed was pressed against the window, so when they slept they would face the closet and the doorway. One night at around 3 a.m. my dad recalls seeing shadows coming from the closet and tries to wake his cousin up, without any success. He doesn't see anything else or hear anything, so he falls back asleep. The next night, my dad hears a noise coming from outside the window behind the bed. He wakes his cousin up and they run to the bedroom where the uncle and aunt are sleeping, with nothing else happening for the remainder of the evening. A couple weekends later my dad stays over for another sleepover. This is where it gets weird. At some point late in the night, 1 a.m., my dad hears something from the closet and more shadows moving. Something must have freaked him out because he starts screaming and all of a sudden a man sprints out of the closet, down the hall and out the door. His cousin wakes up as well as his aunt/uncle. The cops come and do some investigating, but never end up finding anything. Basically the assumption is some creep has been sneaking inside the house and hiding in his cousin's closet. The window behind them would be easy for a creep to look in and inspect the area. Overall it just gives me chills when they tell me the story. They just seem so frightened of it still. I live at the base of a mountain, which is fairly secluded. No humans go there except for me and other people from my family. One summer evening, I decided to climb to the top, which takes about 2 hours, so I set off with my 3 dogs. When we got to the willow maze, which is exactly as it sounds, basically a field of willows with little trails and very limited vision, the dogs started to act a little weird, and while they usually run ahead and do the hike multiple times, they stayed right by me and seemed very anxious. Their anxious energy rubs off on me and suddenly I'm feeling eyes on me, and hearing rustling in the bushes. That's when I hear a faint laughter of a man, and that's also when I ran the fuck out of there as fast as humanly possible. When I got home, I told my dad and he told me that there was a murder in that area and that he hears that all the time, but didn't want to tell me unless he had to. I now stay to my regular route of avoiding the creepy but beautiful willow maze. I'm aware of how fake this sounds, and I wish it was. Okay, so I'm not outdoorsy, but I am very happy being alone and remaining in the same place for long periods of time. As such, I've been known, when either unemployed or on vacation, to take the time alone in an apartment or home, completely alone, for possibly weeks at a time, basically until I run out of food. I think the longest I've gone was an entire month, if one doesn't count taking out the trash and seeing cars go by. If you do, then my longest in total seclusion was about a week. In all honesty, the scariest thing that's happened to me wasn't scary at the time, but in retrospect. Basically I went crazy. Like, straight up probably should have sought out help crazy. I started thinking I was being constantly judged by anyone and everyone. I stopped going outside. I stopped showering, or cleaning up after myself. I was also sure I was being tracked inside the apartment by audio, so I'd go completely silent, hoping my hidden enemies would think me sleeping. I ate sparingly, slept little, and basically spent a lot of time either silently staring at the walls or writing. Eventually of course I had to go out. Then, coming home, I slept from the after effects of adrenaline and mind-numbing terror, and in so doing reset my mind. Waking up after 6 to 7 days up in a paranoid nightmare, I cleaned up, went back to work. Vacation ended. I love caving. Absolutely love it. I even joined a caving club. They send you an information packet once a month about featured cave tours. One month they sent out a packet containing a 7-8 hour wild man caving tour. I've been on wild man tours before, they're not too difficult. Maybe some rappelling or mild climbing. Nothing over an hour. This one had real danger: climb too much to the right and you get stuck. Slip too far and you can fall in a hole. Getting rescued in a deep cave is basically impossible. There were 5 of us, 3 tour guides, me and another person. About halfway through the cave they let us rest on this off-shallow ledge thing that was right next to the biggest drop-off of the cave. The guides told us how with larger groups they did the typical total darkness, had everyone turn off their headlamps and just look around. When he motioned to us to follow suit, we did. After about 30 seconds there was this sound. It honestly sounded like footsteps and then falling rocks and finally a screech. Immediately the head guide flipped on his headlamp and looked at us with a panicked glance. I think he thought one of us had fallen/jumped off the cliff. He turned to the other 2 guides and asked if they heard it. They did but couldn't explain it. They hadn't moved and us 2 were still there. He radioed to the surface and asked if any of the normal tours were missing anyone. This was about 3 hours away from the start of the wild man path, and without our headlamps it was literally like staring into a wall of black. There was no way an inexperienced, or an experienced caver would have made it that far. The guides asked us if we wanted to continue with the experience and would understand and refund us if we decided not to. We went along and eventually completed the tour. Everything else was perfectly normal. I have no idea what that could have been. It wasn't animal footsteps, but that screech was blood-chilling. My family has a cabin in a remote area of the Rocky Mountains. There's this one particular hike nearby that we would always go on when I was growing up that took you up a large hill, cut down into ravine, and took you down to an abandoned mining cabin. It was really cool and the cabin was full of old antiques, books, cans, furniture, etc. So last summer I took my son on the hike to show off this cool abandoned cabin. It had been about 5 years since I'd been on this hike and it took us a while to find the trailhead because it was so overgrown. We hacked our way through brush and luckily I had a really good memory for the general direction we should be going. As we were heading down the ravine we finally saw the roof of the old cabin. Excited that we'd found our way through all the brush we headed towards it. But when we went inside, it was completely different than the last time I'd been there. Instead of cool old furniture and antiques there was a nest. This nest stretched from the floor to ceiling and across 2 entire walls of the cabin. But the most unsettling thing about it is that the nest was made of bones. Not small bones either, they were huge bones. One was the size of a human clavicle and others were bigger. I immediately had this terrible feeling and wanted to GTFO as soon as possible. Well, we booked it out of there and ran up the ravine as quickly as our dog could keep up. We reached the top in less than 30 minutes and were at the top of the hill where we could look down and see our own cabin below. We stopped to catch our breath at the top, which is fairly flat and has a lot of visibility. I decided to use that moment to try and get a signal on the sat phone from the high point. I got a hold of my mom and we were having a quick chat, but I kept hearing a strange noise. It was off in the distance though, so I couldn't make it out. But my son was hearing it too and getting increasingly uncomfortable. I could finally make out the noise but realized that was because the noise was getting louder/closer. It was the sound of 2 metal objects being clanked together, like a spoon banging against a skillet. Then my dog gets super defensive and starts snarling and barking in the direction of where we just hiked out of. So now we are completely freaked the fuck out. I hang up the call, we grab our packs and run the rest of the 2 miles back to our cabin. We reported our experience and gave our photos of the cabin interior to the local Forest Service, who concluded that the nest was most likely a bear or cougar den. But that noise we heard following us out of the ravine will haunt my nightmares for years to come. We had this huge family event where everyone would take off for 2 weeks and go camping. The campsite took 7 hours to get to and is one of the most popular places to go camping in my state. I was 16 so I brought a friend with me. We stayed in the tent because we like to stay up late and freak each other out. Well, one night I woke up having to use the bathroom. The outhouse was up near the end of the loop, so it was maybe a 5-minute walk to get there. I wake my friend up and we head up there. As we're heading back we hear this scream. It sounded far away. We figured people were having fun over near the cabins or something, but decided to investigate and headed out to the lake. When we got to the lake all we could hear was coyotes going fucking insane on the other side. The lake is like 5 miles wide and 15 miles long, so we knew they weren't close. We ran like hell back to the tent. These damn coyotes go crazy for the next 30 minutes. Then complete silence. That is until we hear something walking around our tent. You could hear whatever it was sniffing around and it plops down near the side of the tent. The outline was just this huge lump. Heavy breathing, and then this weird growl. It did not sound like a bear. But it stayed there all night, sniffing our tent, lying next to it. We were terrified. Of course we're not going to scream for help because that will just cause problems. Eventually we fall asleep and whatever it was had left by the time my family came out of the camper. It was probably a bear, but the growl sounded much deeper than a bear growl. Found out the screaming was from an actual bear encounter though. Some couple came out of their camper to find a bear tearing up their campsite. They weren't smart enough to hide the food, or stay in the camper. Don't forget to like and subscribe, for more daily videos, and join the Spooky Squad.